Hey there, Business for Unicorns podcast listeners. This is Mark, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome free resource on businessforunicorns.com. If you ever find yourself feeling frustrated with your training gym because you know that there are all sorts of things you could work on, but you're not really sure how to prioritize, you don't know what's the most important thing to work on or what order you should be tackling your priorities, well, now is the time to go to businessforunicorns.com, click the button, and fill out our free self-assessment. With the Ultimate Training Gym Owner Report Card, you will gain immediate clarity on just where to be focusing your attention to create more positive impact on your community, to drive more revenue and take home income, and to do it all with less stress and more peace of mind. So go to businessofunicorns.com, click the button, fill out that free self-assessment, and start building a business and life you love today.
Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today, I'm doing another roundtable conversation with some Unicorn Society members. And I'm excited for today because today is going to be a really tactical, practical conversation. The topic is how to do some goal setting and use key metrics to help drive your business. So how do you set goals and use key metrics to help run your business more effectively? And I'm talking with two amazing Unicorn Society members who are going to share all of their experience and know-how on this topic in our conversation today. So without further ado, let me welcome both to the stage. What's up, Matt? Hey, Adam. How are you both? Thanks for being here.
Hey, Michael.
Thanks for having us so much.
Hi. Well, let's just start with doing some quick introductions. I'll start with you, Matt. I'd love for you to just tell our listeners, like, who the heck are you? What's your business? Where are you in the world? And like, what's, maybe one of your greatest superpowers? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. My name is Matt Kasee. I own a gym called Trilogy Fitness Systems in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a semi-private personal training studio. And I'd say my superpower would be I can create a fun environment in the gym very easily.
Yeah, that's no joke. I'll share one tidbit about Matt. You want to tell him about your puppet?
Francois Leboeuf, the former French PhD and world weightlifting record holder.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. How did that come to fruition?
I have a long-standing love of the Muppets and everything nerdy and dorky. And I decided one day I want to get a puppet for the gym to have a mascot other than my dog. So Francois was born. And sporadically on Mondays, Francois gives fitness tips to the world.
I love that. That's amazing. I'll have to have you back for another podcast where we just talk about how to best use puppets in training gyms.
It's very niche, but I think it could go well.
We need more of them. Thanks for being here, my friend. Adam, tell us about you.
My name's Adam Terry. I was a 7-year NFL vet, so I spent a lot of time in the NFL and playing football. We currently reside in Rochester, New York, and the name of the sports performance facility is Powertrain. So there's multiple units throughout the Northeast, but the two in Rochester are mine.
Amazing. And what would you say, Adam, is one of your greatest superpowers?
My greatest superpowers being able to crank up intensity in kind of a few seconds. So walking into a facility and just getting it cranked up.
Yeah, I love that. Taking everyone from 0 to 60 real fast. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Adam. I'm stoked for this conversation. So let's start with this. I know you've both, been running your businesses for a while now, and I imagine that you weren't always great at goal setting or using key metrics in your business. So I'll go back and start with you on this one, Matt. Just walk me through when you first started your business. What was your approach, if any, to setting goals and using metrics to run the business? How did you start?
So I've been independently training now for about 11, 12 years, running a business for about 7 or 8. And when I first started, everything was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I would track revenue and expenses, and that was about it. Everything else I would just kind of wing on the fly.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, right. I was like, oh, this number is getting bigger, so we're good. So that was kind of where I started, with very little structure in place at all.
Yeah.
That was
what were some of the first kind of signs that like you should be setting more clear goals or tracking? Like what were some of the pain points you were experiencing that were like, oh, there's got to be a better way?
The first hire that I made, I realized I needed more structure. So then I started adding in a couple more kind of metrics. We started tracking how many clients we had and a couple of things like that. But again, it wasn't structured at all.
Yeah.
And there was no real goals other than get more people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so common, Matt, because I think I hear that from a lot of people who say, when I hired my first employee, things changed. I had to start communicating about the business in ways I didn't have to when it was just me.
Yeah.
I started to have to, like, get clear about where we're going with another person in a way I didn't have to before. I think that's often a really important moment for folks to realize, oh, there's other ways that I have to run the business when there's other people involved. So yeah, I think it's a really common one. Yeah. What about you, Adam? When you first started the business, what was your approach, if any, to goal setting and using metrics?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, just as everybody, when they first open a facility or they start their own small business, is the doors are open, you expect people to come in.
Yeah.
And that necessarily wasn't the case. So I started off a little bit differently. The first thing that I did was I hired 2 employees, and were able to kind of guide them throughout the whole process. And, our key metrics then were, how many trials are coming in the door? What is the conversion rate on that? What does our monthly revenue look like? And then there was an epiphany of, okay, well, we're here, we're doing okay. More money is coming in than more money is going out. So then it was just, what are the other things that you look at throughout a month that are going to be key? So we were able to throw a bunch of things in a pot, and we'll kind of talk about those later. But that allowed us to open a second location. So the struggle was at the beginning, and the more employees that I had, the more that we had to start to dial in what was fluff and then what were key things that we were going to look at on a monthly basis.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You kind of both have that in common, is that, the more staff you add, the more pressure it puts on you as a operator to, like, really get clear about where are we going? How do we know if we're getting there? Right? What's working and what's not working? And I think the other thing you say here, Adam, I think is really so smart, which is, for some of us, it might take a little while for us to know, what actually are the drivers of the business. You might need to be doing this for a minute to decide, okay, well, what things should we really care about and count and measure? And what's just noise? What's the stuff that if we measure, it's not going to tell us anything? And I think it's really smart of you that, you took your time measuring some things, and then we're open to measuring some others as you grew. I think that's huge. Yeah. We'll just talk a little bit. So back to you, Matt. When you first started thinking about doing some more goal setting or using more key metrics, where did you start then? I mean, how did you learn to try and get good at this?
Stupidly, it took me way longer than I think it should have. Because in fitness, it's all we do with people. And my meathead brain said it has to be different than what I'm doing with clients and fitness and health goals. And it was very similar to that.
Yeah.
Where my first iterations of it were, I need to make more money. I want to make, 25% more this year. And it was very vague and big like that, with no real direction. And then when I got into Business Unicorns maybe 2-3 years ago now, that's when I started keeping track of a more specific scorecard and actually tracking more specific goals to let myself, similar to what Adam said, like, find out what I need to actually track.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also a really common place where people start, where they start setting goals that are too vague. And when you had those vague goals, how did that turn out for you? Like, what was the impact of having really vague goals?
I mean, the business was small, so we were growing. So I was like, oh, it's working. But it was just because we were small and we were good at what we do. I mean, I didn't need to do well at that point. So it didn't really direct us, and it didn't really give me a lot of structure. And as somebody, as you mentioned earlier, who watches the Muppets and things as a grown man still, I need some things to give me guardrails and to keep me organized and focused.
Yeah. I love the analogy that you made about the kind of goal setting and metric keeping that we do for our clients being so similar. Can you just spell out that analogy for us?
Yeah, it's the SMART goals, right? It's specific, measurable, actionable, related, and time oriented.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what we help. Our clients come in the door and we go, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to accomplish? Feel
Right.
better, look better, move better. And then let's create a program that measures how well you're doing on path to those goals. And somehow all those skills we sometimes forget can apply directly to the business.
Right.
So I think it's a great analogy for our listeners. Yeah. What about you, Adam? When you started to realize there was other metrics you could start tracking and things like that? Well, let's talk about goals first. When you started to change your approach to goal setting, what did the first few iterations look like?
Yeah, when I first got into the goal setting, it was, what does the facility look like? How does it operate? Um, what is the end goal for a facility? What is the revenue? So on and so forth. And I was hit with a tumultuous time where I had 4 employees stand at the door and tell me, "Hey, I can do this better than you." So,
Wow.
there went a majority of my staff, 80% of my staff. And after that point, I started to realize, hey, there has to be, the watch can look pretty, but the cogs within it need to work as well. So I had 1 or 2 guys doing the heavy lifting of, bringing people in, making sure that they were educated on the process. And I had to go back and start to say, well, everybody's a cog in this wheel. And we need to make sure that, granted, somebody who had been with me for 4 or 5 years needed to do X. And then the person that was, a new employee had to do Y. And yes, they were different, but they were still working towards the end goal of, hey, what can a facility do? But those were a couple of the key moments in time where you're like, what do I do? I mean, 80% of your staff leaves. That left 2 of us to manage the rest. And, fortunately, we had a good reputation in town, and we were able to find other people that wanted to be part of us. But that's what drove me to the understanding of, if you're here for 3 months, these are a more systematic approach to it. If you've been with us for 36 months plus, or whether you've been an employee for 54 months plus, this is where you should be. And it allowed a lot more clarity. And, if we were fantastic at it, I think we're pretty good at it. But if we were fantastic at it, I wouldn't be with Business for Unicorns. So those are the things. And I think, having been coached for a long time, and whether that's, sports or so on and so forth, I think we need the peer environment to kind of fine tune us along the way, and then also show us our blind spots. And I think that's what I've started to see since I've joined the group in January.
Yeah. Well, I think it's useful context for our audience here. But what a wild moment you had when 80% of your team won't have the door. I mean, that'll really teach you what you're made out of, right? Is how do you pick up the pieces from that? But I think one of the distinctions you're making here, Adam, which I think is really wise, and I think it takes people a while to learn this, is that the goals are often the goals, and they're independent from often what the operations need to look like or how you achieve the goals, right? Because I think for most training gyms, the goals are almost always to get the most number of people in there, paying the most and staying the longest, while also having the least expenses, right? If I had to summarize what everyone's annual goals always look like, is more growth, less expenses. And oftentimes with owners and founders, it's also more flexibility and freedom for myself, right? But those are pretty much everyone's goals always. And to your point, those can be your big picture goals, and they need to look very different based on what's happening at the organization. Do I have all brand new people? Do I have people who've been around for a long time? Do I have different roles and responsibilities in place this year than I did last year? What's the external environment look like, right? So how you activate towards your goals is so contextual. Right, that is always a moving piece. And that's what part of requires us to be good operators, is not just setting these lofty goals, but learning how to duck and weave and pivot as a team to achieve them when our context changes, right? Half our team's gone, right? Or COVID happens, And so I think it's a really good distinction, is that, the goals are the end results and the outcomes we're looking for. And all the strategies and things we implement along the way, those are different. And we want to be really agnostic about the strategies, and we really want to be really firm on the outcomes. So I think that that distinction you made, I think, is really useful. So back to you, Matt. So What about now? So now that you've been doing some, and you've been with us for a few years, you've been doing some regular goal setting and key metrics. If you had to list like the top, 3 to 5 things that you do now that are really working for you, that are making things more efficient, more clear, what's really working for you now?
The biggest shift that we made this past year was actually bringing our staff in to be part of the process instead of just being me at the helm making decisions.
Yep.
Because as I've stepped a little bit further off of the training floor, they have a better pulse than I do. So we spent last year, 2 years ago, doing all kind of SOP kind of things of just let's get more organization, better communication, and it was all kind of back end and client focused.
Yep.
So then this year, and it worked tremendously well for us in terms of our annual goals. So then this year it's turned back into kind of, since we got the customer focus side nailed down last year's doing well, we're now shifting the focus to refine it more on our individual operations and the team organization. So we can see where to make the shifts. So we have different annual focus each year that allows us to kind of, navigate as we need to.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. I love the idea of including as much of your team as you can in goal setting, right? In goal setting and in metrics, right? That they should be responsible for tracking or performing of certain goal metrics. The more you can include them, the more buy-in you're going to get. Yeah. So walk our listeners through this. I'm going to put you on the spot, Matt. So we take most people in Unicorn Society through kind of an EOS or traction style planning process. EOS, for the listeners who don't know, is the Entrepreneur Operating System. So we do a version of that. Can you just talk through like what your cadence is for planning, like when you plan what throughout the year?
So the fourth quarter last year is when we tend to go into the first quarter and put up our big kind of annual goals. You hit it already. Like our annual goals are always kind of the same. We want to have a certain revenue growth, certain expenses. If we want to hire more staff, for those kind of big picture things. So we set those up as a team. And then the first quarter, we basically just break down what are 2 to 4 things that we need to focus on to get us part of the way there. So this year, our focus has been, like I said, it's been more on how do we operate better. Make sure we can kind of refine this side of it. So then next quarter, we'll kind of look to see how everything's going. We're trying to hire right now. So our goals have been 1 or 2 of them are going to get pushed to next quarter already. I'm kind of sensing that right now.
Sure.
So being flexible with it at the same time of understanding that it's not going to be this perfect, great, check done, check done, check done.
Sure. How do you keep your team on track and accountable throughout the year?
In our weekly meetings, we're getting better with this. This is where we struggle. We do weekly meetings. They're not the best. We're just now starting to put a regular itinerary to keep everything tracked. But we're doing check-ins every week now to kind of make sure we're actually working on the projects we need to work on.
Yeah, good for you. And I'm so glad you're including your team in that. So, for our listeners, just to recap, I think, that what Matt explained is kind of the bones of, I think, a good goal setting and key metric process, which is you set big old goals for the quarter that your whole team has bought into. Ideally, they've participated in creating. Then you break those into like quarterly or, these every 3-month chunks of like what projects or pieces are we going to do in the next 3 months. Then you have, your key metrics every week that you review in a team meeting to say, are we on track? Are we heading in the direction that would mean that we will achieve this goal by the end of the year? And that kind of like, trifecta, right, of annual goals, kind of quarterly goals and projects, and regular weekly meetings to stay on track. That's kind of the system we've seen that works the best. And to Matt's point here, again, I want to highlight, when you can include more of your team in it, the more buy-in and the more perspectives and diversity of opinion you have, which is fantastic. Yeah. What about you, Adam? What's working for you these days? What are the handful of things that you're doing from a goal setting and key metrics perspective that you're like, yeah, this is really crushing it for us?
Yeah, I think it's been the same for years. It's, start at your end goal. What does it look like at the end of the year? Reverse engineer that into quarters. What does the quarters look like? And then what are the key things on a monthly basis, giving the ebb and flow of 10 years of business, knowing what a month would look like, and also knowing what the month would look like in specific context. So, what does January look like opposed to April? Or in our business, what does May look like compared to September? So we those are kind of the things that we break down consistently.
Sure.
And then, we're doing a weekly meeting of, what are our goals? How are we getting there? Putting our check marks on these specifics. So for us, it's the outreach. What does it look like from organic growth outreach of calling coaches or individuals or athletic directors, because we're very sports performance centric. And then what is the conversion rate on that? How many people are we able to bring in from that? And then just the check marks for each individual. How many people are coming in off of that? So after your conversion rate for trial, what's our conversion rate from trial into the facility? As well as the one key metric that it took a while to figure out, but a percentage base of the churn. So we're an annual contract within our facility. But how I like to do it is different than others. Like, we want to be able to re-sign them.
Sure.
So then it's consistency on our checkpoint. So we make a phone call, or we set up a time or an appointment after 30, 90, 180, 270. And then at that 360 checkpoint, you got 5 days left, we should have a very good gauge on what that looks like for retention.
Yeah. Well said, Adam. Let me just highlight for our listeners some things I heard in there that I think are worth repeating. One is the first thing you said, I think, is a really great way of thinking about goal setting as it relates to quarterly goals and metrics, which is reverse engineering, right? You want to start with the end in mind. And so if you can start as a team thinking about where do you want to get to, and then work backwards from there, what is that going to take? How do we break that into different quarters? And I think, one of the things that you're pointing out here, which is really useful, is that all of those goals and all those strategies need to translate down to like the individual level to clarify, okay, well, what do we all do now? Right? What does our work look like today, tomorrow, this week, this month? And if all those strategies don't trickle down to like really clear, actionable items and accountability for all your team, then it's not worth it, right? All of that clarity up top has got to translate to clarity on the ground every day. When I walk into work, I know my most important tasks. I think you said that really well, which is how many outreaches am I doing? What was my conversion from these conversations? I think all the key metrics you listed were really fantastic. Yeah. And so you mentioned one of the tough ones for you to figure out how to wrap your arm around was churn, because I know you said you have a renewal process. But now that you have that metric, what's that done for you?
It's been able to be communicated, with everybody through the facility. So, in our case, we have a facility director, performance director, and performance coaches. So, a facility director might understand what we're trying to accomplish, but if it doesn't go down all the way to the performance coach or even necessarily an intern, then we're missing the mark. So for us, we're always kind of chasing a goal of 75 to 80% retention at the end of a year contract. And I think the biggest thing for us that has changed was when everybody understood it. I can communicate at a level with our managers, but I had to communicate with the guy who, might have been an intern with us, was not privy to some of the higher level conversations. But as they've stepped out on the floor, having them understand it at a pretty laser focused level that is now being conveyed more consistently at our sales meeting.
Yeah, well said, Adam. I think that's a wonderful way of thinking about this, is that at the end of the day, all of this goal setting and metrics are a communication tool. Right, they really are a communication tool, and if people who are the leadership of the organization understand it, and you can get everyone who are the lowliest among us, even the interns, even if they can understand your strategies and your metrics and what it was required of them to participate in that, then you're really winning. I think that there's a right way of thinking about this. If you're really clear about all this stuff, it really helps with communication up and down the organization, which I think is huge. Like, what a great tool for communication to have everything in one place about here's where we're heading, here's how we're measuring if we're going to get here, and here's your responsibility for contributing to this picture. right? Here's how we're tracking your efforts on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. Back to you, Matt. What are some, I know Adam rattled off a bunch of key metrics that he tracks and finds useful. What are the key metrics you find yourself looking at on a regular basis that feel most useful to you?
Yeah, ours are real simple. We do termination rate, we do leads, low barrier offers, and then how many new members we have.
Yep.
Those are kind of those basic ones. And then I kind of include client feedback as well. So we do monthly check-ins with them, and then like a big quarterly feedback check-in with them.
Yep.
So we include all of that as well. So the feedback stuff we look at quarterly to kind of see what have we been screwing up kind of globally.
Yeah.
And then we allow those meetings to kind of dictate the individual goals. And we do like the open book management style here. So even our lowly interns can sit in on our meetings and stuff. They never do, but
Totally.
the door is open for them if they want to.
Totally.
So everybody's on the same page. Because like you said, it's communication. And when they all kind of see it, it does make the process smoother.
Yeah. Oh, now I feel bad for any interns listening. I'm so sorry to have called you all lowly, but you're essential, vital part of our industry.
They're lowly essential.
You're totally essential, lowly workers. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And the thing you're highlighting there, and I know you both have heard me say this before, so forgive me. This is more for our listeners. But for our listeners, when we in Unicorn Society, we talk about scorecards and key metrics, we think of key metrics in 4 different categories. The categories are attract, convert, deliver, and collect. And those 4 words are pretty self-explanatory, but it means like, how are you attracting new people to the business? Are you counting your number of new emails and followers and subscribers? All the ways that you're marketing, are you counting that you're making progress there? Converting makes sense, which is, how many low barrier offers are you selling or trials? What's your conversion percentage, right? And how many new members are you getting? And then the deliver part this is what made me think of this, Matt, is that's where client satisfaction is. How do we know we're delivering a good experience? Are people showing up for their sessions? Are they canceling, no showing, freezing, terminating? Are there surveys we're sending out to gauge their satisfaction? And the last category is collect, which is like, is this making us any money? Right? There's money coming in on a regular basis. And I think, for me at least, that's been a really helpful just kind of way to think about key metrics, is as if our business is one giant funnel, and I want to track some of the most important things that happen in every step of that funnel. And those 4 steps of attract, convert, deliver, and collect just kind of makes sense to me. So I don't know if that's helpful to listeners. I know you and Adam have heard this before, but I share that with our listeners because I think it's been really useful to me. So to wrap things up here, gents, I want to ask you 1 or 2 more final questions, which is, if for our listeners right now who are not currently doing like really any structured goal setting or not really tracking any metrics, where should they start? I'm going to start with you, Adam, this time. What's your advice to our listeners who are not doing any goal setting or track any metrics? What's the first step for them?
Easy as start, right? I think if you're in a situation where you haven't been tracking, you don't know what's going on in your business. It's a lot of people start their business, but they are still the employee. So what I look at a lot of times is it's as simple as how many people are coming in the door. That's your generation, that's your lead. Out of those people, how many people are walking over to the cash register and making that transaction? The long-term effect of that is, can you keep them there? So how we go through our facility, like I said, we're sports performance. We deal with high-level high school, collegiate, and pro athletes. If they're happy and they're screaming from the mountaintop, they are our biggest lead generator. So once they bring in their friends, it's able to, hey, let's start you up with a trial. And then from the trial process, it is the conversion. The hardest part for some people is that transaction, whether that's a credit card coming across or whether that's cash coming across. And when I first started, I felt like I was imposing. It wasn't my first instinct was to make that transaction. But when you look at it further down the road, the way that you keep them there is by what you're doing inside the walls. So It's as simple for me as lead generation. That's first and foremost what I would track. Conversion from that lead generation, how we would look at that is, are they coming in for a trial? And then next would be transaction. Are they saying, hey, we're willing to come in and make this a done deal, handshake, fist bump, high
Mm-hmm.
five, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then long-term success that we found is, what's the churn? Are people staying? Are people leaving? Why are they leaving? So there's a couple metrics within that we can track, but the next thing, the final thing with that would be the churn. Those are
Sure.
the key things that we're looking at consistently. And then in order to have longevity, it's, what is the profit margin? You're generating now, you're starting to look at, hey, what does my top line revenue look like? Kind of then tracking what are your expenses. You want to try to keep them to a minimum. And then as a business owner, it's always nice to get paid and not be, tethered to your
Mm-hmm.
business, because it is a zombie and it's just kind of walking around. It's there, but it's not really there. So if I'm starting out a new business and I'm new to this and I haven't tracked anything, that's what I would go back to.
Yeah.
And we consistently do right now as it is.
Yeah, those are some great ones to start with. And even if people started with just the first few you talked about, because it's the top of the funnel that winds up being kind of the most important forever. And so I think that's a great place to start. What about in terms of goal setting, Adam? If someone right now has just never sat down and written down a goal for their team or worked with their team on setting goals, what's the best way to do that for the first time?
Well, I think it's being transparent. I think we get into this business because we have a passion for it. So whenever the goal setting process comes down, or whether it's a meeting, is be transparent. Also within that context, it's be empathetic, because you don't know how someone's day is going. And if you can continue to keep them engaged throughout the process, you can then take those key metrics, and throughout a meeting, you're going to have an engaged employee and also another person that's shouting from the mountaintop how good we are at what we do. And that makes the transactional aspect for a lot of people a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's an important part of learning to be good at goal setting with your team, at least, is learning to be transparent with your team, because you can't be honest about where you're heading unless you can be honest about where you're at. Right. And so I think that idea of sitting down with your team and be really candid about, here's where we are. Let's think together about where we want to go. Let's be honest with each other about, all the things, how much money's coming in, how much are we spending, how much can I pay you, how much am I getting paid? I've personally found, similar to what you're saying here, is the more transparent I can be, the more clear I can be with my team, the better equipped they'll be at helping me with goal setting. And so, yeah, well said, Adam. Thank you for that. Yeah, same question to you, Matt, which is just, if any of our listeners are thinking about goal setting or tracking metrics for the first time, what's your advice on where to start?
If they're not doing any tracking, I just start with the basics.
Yeah.
I mean, those are those things that if they start adding in, 10 layers of it, it's like our clients, they're going to stop after a week. They're going to get lost and overwhelmed. So I would
it's too much too soon. Yeah.
Too much. It's at that stage, I'm assuming they're probably doing the job a lot as well.
Yeah.
So find those ways to kind of track the leads, track the conversions, and then getting a basic understanding of the profit and loss will do so much for them. And then that's going to help them scale. That's going to help them do more of these things so that they can then add more of those layers. But I think that base understanding of what's coming in, how long are my people staying with me, and then what are we bringing in and what's going out the door, I think is essential before anything else.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And same thing about goal setting. When you think back to when you first started sitting down and being more consistent and structured about how you set goals with your team, how did you get that ball rolling?
So I think it's interesting because listen to Adam. His is a little more methodical than mine is. Mine's a little more, I want to go to the top of the mountain here. First step would probably be these 3 things. And I just kind of build off of it rather than going the other way.
Got it.
So I'm big on letting the team be involved in that kind of big picture side of it, allowing all of that transparency that you guys mentioned, because if they are on board, they do more. I mean,
Yeah.
Zach and Helen, my two main employees, they crush it for me because we're all on the same vision. We have the same plan that helps that goal setting easy. So I would set aside kind of a big annual goal, and every quarter do 1 or 2 project-based things that are going to help you get to a big end goal.
Yeah. I think it's well said, Matt. I think it goes back to the point I think I was trying to make earlier, which is you really want to be really on the same page with your whole team on the vision. You really want to clear where are we going long term? And then you want to be really agnostic about how you get there, right? And let everyone participate in like, hey, maybe this is how we get here. Hey, maybe this is how we get there. And when they can participate in that, they're again going to have more buy-in, more focus, more commitment, and you also have more better ideas. You'll have more and better ideas when you get more brains working on the same challenge. There's not just one way to climb a mountain. Right? There's lots of ways to get there. And so I love your idea of really making this collaborative.
Yeah, all three of us, the three main people here, have wildly different thoughts on it too. So it gives so many more ideas to it. And I think it's helped our clients who, when we've input a new training protocol kind of thing, they've been, oh my God, this is amazing. You did such a good job. And I just point, Zach's idea, he hit a home run with this one kind of thing. And they get to see those gaps that I don't see because I only look at it through my Muppet loving brain. So.
I love that. All right, gents. Well, I feel like I'm going to wrap it up there. This was such a great conversation. I just really appreciate both coming and sharing both, like, your warts and your wins. Because I mean, we weren't all born being great at this, right? Learning how to be a good goal setter and learning how to pick and manage key metrics and use them to effectively run a business, like this takes time to learn. And so thank you both for sharing with our listeners like what your journey's been. Last thing, can you just tell our listeners if they want to learn more about you or the business, where can they find you, Adam?
So there's 15 locations of Powertrain throughout the Northeast. We're in New York, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And you can easily check us out at powertrainsports.com. And, the two locations in Rochester, New York, you can email me at adamterry@powertrainsf.com. So any questions as we've gone through this, then
great.
And they're willing to inquire, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, my friends. And what about you, Matt?
The website's trilogyfitnesssystems.com. We're active on Instagram, same handle there. And it's Matt Kasee, Kasee. Same, if people want to reach out and chat with me about any of it, I'm happy to talk. It's Matt, MATT, at trilogyfitnesssystems.com.
Amazing. That was great, Jens. And all of those links and things you just mentioned will be in the show notes at businessforunicorns.com/podcast. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us. If this was useful to you, share this, comment, subscribe, tell us down below other topics you'd like us to cover in our roundtable conversations or just in general. And then one more big thanks to you, Jens, for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a blast.
Thank you. I was waiting for Adam.
Thank you. It's a blast.
We crushed it. Thank you.
Well, I hope you loved today's podcast, and forgive me, I want to remind you one more time, if you haven't already done so, head over to businessforunicorns.com, click the button, and get your free self-assessment, the ultimate training gym owner report card. I promise you're going to want to dig into this resource and get the support you need, finding crystal clarity on exactly where you need to be focusing to create a life and a business you love.